Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 8 of Shelf Review, where today we'll be going over episodes 30 through 39 of the animated monster. Now, to begin, I thought this was a thing that really needed to be clarified early on because I will be talking about these two characters relatively extensively. So, there are two people who go by the name of Margot Langer. Firstly, you have the mother of Carl, who's now Carl Schubald because he's been accepted by his father. Now, his name was technically before that Carl Langer. So, Margot Langer, the actual one who held the name, was the mother of Carl. Now, there's another woman, a high-end prostitute, who goes by that name, but she stole it so that she could, gyp Schubald out of his money and make him pay her, even though he knew that it wasn't the actual Margot. So, she is now known as the Red Hindenburg, like the blimp and all that. So that's how this differentiates. So I'll be referring to her as the Red Hindenburg from now on. Okay, so I believe the best way I'm going to go about this is to discuss each character's story individually, because most of them have relatively distinct stories in these episodes. So to begin with, Reichwein is the psychologist who we saw in the previous episodes, who was helping Richard Brown, the investigator, get through his alcoholism and troubles and all that. So after the death of Richard, we see Reichwein, who does not believe that Richard killed himself or fell off a building drunk, and this is due to the fact how ecstatic he felt about getting to see his daughter soon after that, and he called Reichwein and told him all that. So Reichwein goes into digging into investigating. He ends up going to the Red Hindenburg and talking with her, and he starts slowly learning about Johann. And throughout this, we see little clips where he's talking to one of his clients, and he's kind of disassociated, just sitting there thinking about the actual pertinent problem. And with that, we don't know if she's of any significance at the time. We don't really believe so. So it's kind of misleading, but she does become significant by the end of this arc. So with that, we see him, and he's slowly developing an idea and thoughts toward Johann, because he's slowly connecting the dots that, hey, Johann was around Richard at the time. The whiskey that was found at the crime scene was not drank by Richard. Richard drank Scotch, very high quality Scotch. So it was obviously evident that he didn't kill himself or didn't drunkenly fall off a building. And he ends up connecting back to Johann. And through this, the husband of the woman who's been talking to him, who has had an affair with another woman, so I guess extramaritally from his wife. And with that, he comes in because his wife told him, hey, I want you to come here and talk with the psychologist because I know what you're doing. And the man comes in there, and we see him. It's Roberto. And Roberto's talking with Reichwein. And Reichwein, they're discussing. And eventually they get talking. And he ends up just essentially revealing that he is a hitman. And that he also sees, Reichwein's picture of Johann that he has acquired through his research. And so they go into the kitchen and try to make some tea, and Reichwein tries to flee. And while he's fleeing, Roberto falls after him. He's come to shoot him. He's come to kill him. And he's shooting at him from the top. And then, once he's running down the stairs, we see Tenma is down there. He's firing back at Roberto, and that allows Reichwein to escape. Him and Tenma group up, and they and Dieter go and stay at a local place. And throughout this arc, we kind of see a side of Tenma we haven't seen yet. We see that Tenma is really psychologically struggling with this endeavor, because throughout he seems very depressed and just very down because of the task he has to deal with. Because essentially he has the weight of the world on his hands, because Johann has the ability to do very, very drastic things. So that's where the main portion of Reichwein's story comes into play. Now, then after that, we shift back to Lunge briefly. And we see Lunge is honestly kind of breaking down as well, because Lunge is trying to put himself in the shoes of Tenma, and he's doing everything. He's involving himself in Japanese culture. He's meeting up with Japanese people. He's acquiring Japanese customs. He even doesn't agree to go see his grandchild because he's like, no, Tenma wouldn't do that. Tenma's a loner. And so we see Lunge kind of breaking down. And after that, we see Lunge's once again next thing we're going to follow more of Lunge's story, because Lunge doesn't play too much of a role in this last part of the arc. So after that, Lunge and Rudy meet back up, and Rudy reveals to Lunge how he has known of Tenma stuff, and he's protecting Tenma, even though that technically isn't illegal, because Tenma is not a criminal, and he's not, I guess, there's not enough evidence to corroborate him being a criminal or murderer. And so with that, Tenma still believes that Johan is an alternate personality of Lunge still believes that Tenma and Johan are alternate personalities inside Tenma. And so that's kind of what happens with Lunge. But then after that, we see as Tenma ends up finding Johan because he figures out through Reichwein that he is the secretary now to Schubald after Johan reconnected Carl and Schubald. And this all eventually leads to them figuring out that Schubald is going to end up donating a large portion of his books, or I believe it's almost all of them, to the Munich University. And so, I believe it's, I don't remember the exact name of the library, it's like, it starts with an F or something like that. It's going to be donated to this library. And so, with that, we have the build up to what is eventually the big conclusion of the arc. So, we see that, and then we have a little short side story of Lotta. And Lotta is the girl who was helping Carl earlier on to figure out about the kid who ended up hanging himself, and just more and more about Johan and about Schubal in general. And then with that, we have a brief Johan arc, and that's what I really liked about. And like I said, Lotta has her little show. It's not very, I guess, important because she goes out with Nina. Nina they end up going to a dance, and this man reveals that Carl paid him to dance with Lotta. So that's all really sad, and it made me feel for Lotta. So I don't really hope anything happens to Lotta, but I mean, I don't really know why it would, because she's not that significant of a player in the story. And she does know stuff about Johan. She knows who Johan is. That's really about it. So then we have a brief Johan arc, and Johan is, and we have, okay, so these kind of coexist, at least in the exact same, well, no, it's one episode than the other. Well, we see Dieter, and he's communicating with this kid who's in the hospital who's injured, and this kid ends up revealing to him that he's been affected by Johan, and Johan's been manipulating him. So we know that Johan is now brainwashing children. And with that, the little boy, he ends up like taking Dieter to the top of the roof, and they end up playing this game, walking along the edge, and then he ends up breaking and goes back down. Now, after that, we see Johan in the next episode talking to a kid, and the kid's revealing to him how he's played this game, but he wants to see something more fearful. And his mom, due to the fact that he's been playing this dangerous game, his mom's made him stay inside. So Johan's like, I'll go get you a book. And he goes to the library, and he finds this children's picture book, and he's looking at it, and he just screams and falls out. So we're like, what happened to Johan? Well, after that, we see for a brief time that Johan is now looking for the Margot Langer, or who is the Red Hindenburg. He goes to look for the Red Hindenburg, and going down there, dark alleyway and all that, he's looking for her. And they end up communicating, and he finds her. They talk for a brief moment. She's predominantly the one doing the talking. She was yammering on about how, I guess, she technically has a, I guess, advantage over Johan somehow, and she's threatening him with her husband, who's behind a door with knocking. And eventually, after a while, Johan gets up to leave, and she calls her husband in, and well, it's not her husband, it's her boyfriend. And then we figure out who it was that Roberto was having an affair with, because he's the one who comes out, and he kills the Red Hindenburg point blank, and Johan walks up the building. And when he walks up the building, he finds this tweaker on the side of the road. He gives her a bunch of money. He's like, go get your fix. So I guess Burr's trying to check all the boxes for being, I guess, just indescribably immoral. But then with that, we start leading more toward the eventual climax at the library. And so, through this, we see as Rudy and Reichwein are trying to find a ways to stop Tenma from just straight up going and killing Johan. Because Tenma ends up acquiring a sniper rifle, and he kind of goes off the grid from them. So, he's setting up to kill Johan at this library, because he knows that Schubal will be there for a speech, and that Johan will be there as well, because he's the secretary, and he helps him a lot since he's blind and really kind of disabled. He's not disabled, but due to his age, he just can't walk as well. So that ends up happening, and then with that, we then see, I guess, I don't really know how to really arrange this in events, but we see the beginning of it, and they're all setting up everything, and then we see a brief scene of Nina. Well, this is actually during the setup. So we have Tenma, he's sitting up on top of a library shelf, and he is scoping out Johan, and he learns that that is where the thing's going to be, because of the newspaper, and because he's spotted out Johan going to this place with Carl. So that ends up happening. Tenma is setting up, and Rifine and Rudy are trying to find Tenma to stop him from taking this drastic measure and making himself an actual murderer. So, with that, that's the setup. The speech ends up going, and then in the scene, we see Lota come to Nina because she realizes that they look exactly the same and they become friends. So she realizes that her and Johan are very, very similar looks-wise. And so she's talking with her and she's like, okay, your brother, I know he's your brother. He fainted after reading this book, so I want you to look at it. And she looks at it and she tells the story of it within, and it's about these two monsters. And the monsters are the same monster, they just separate. And they go to different sides of the world. And one of the monsters continues to gobble up people for their names. And once he gets into a child, eventually a young prince, he doesn't gobble him up, but he rather just gobbles up everyone around him. And then once he finds the other monster again, the other monster's like, I'm satisfied. I don't need a name to be happy. And then the unsatisfied monster gobbles up the other one. I mean, it's like clomp, crunch, gulp, gobble, gobble. I believe that's like the array of words that she says like every single time the other monster eats someone. Yeah, so we see the story, and this story, I believe, I haven't watched past this point in the series yet, but I believe it is an integral point of foreshadowing once we look later on. So, with this, we see the speech begin, and Schubal's giving the speech, Tim is prepared to shoot Johan, and well, with giving the speech and all that, we end up seeing this woman who was supposed to be Roberto's wife, as she was talking to Rifine about her affair, about her husband's affair, Roberto's affair. And she is with Johan. She's setting up kerosene and gasoline around the library so that it can burn down in an explosive blaze. And with this, we're the only one who knows this, so it's not necessarily, it's not a known thing. Just Johan and this woman know it. Not even Roberto knows it. And so he is preparing to shoot Johan, Tenma is, and then Roberto gets him because Johan has been telling people throughout this entire time that a Japanese man is going to shoot him. So Johan knew that Tenma was after him, and he presumed perfectly where he would be. So Roberto tries to take him down, and they end up throwing each other off the shelf. There's a brief scuffle, and Roberto sets up and prepares to shoot Schuval. And then, eventually, fire starts. Johan is just sitting there chilling. The woman starts the fire. Everything lights ablaze. And then, with that, we see Schuval is now, well, previously he was trying to attempt it, but he's surprised because he believed that he was supposed to shoot Schuval, and that wasn't the goal in the end, and he just ends up laughing because he's like, Johan, you're a genius. And then after that, we see a brief standoff between Tenma and Roberto, and Roberto is very convinced that Tenma is not going to shoot him. He's like, you're a doctor, man, you heal people, I kill people, I'm really good at it. And Tenma ends up shooting him, he ends up killing him, so I believe that is it may be Tenma's first on-screen kill. So Tenma ends up killing Roberto. So Roberto is out. Now, I was kind of disappointed about that because I liked Roberto as a villain because anyone who was anywhere was Roberto. That's just who it was. And then, with that, we end up seeing the fire lighting ablaze and all that. People are trying to escape frantically. And then I believe that's actually where the story is, where it gets a brief intersection and all that. And then we have a scene where Tenma is now trying to go after Johan, and he goes after Johan, and he first helps people out of the building. He helps everyone get out, and Dieter and Reichwein had ended up appearing at the library, but they weren't inside because they weren't going to the place. They were going there to save Tenma and make sure he didn't make himself a murderer. And then eventually Nina shows up, she's there to help them, and she breaks in. Tenma's helping everyone break out. They end up getting out, most of them safely. I believe there's only 5 casualties in the end. And then, with that, we have Tenma and Johan's face-off. Now, Tenma, he couldn't shoot Johan when he had the sniper rifle on the library shelf, but now he's ready because he's seen the fire light ablaze and all that, so he is holding Tenma at gunpoint. But while he's holding Johan at gunpoint. I guess my words are all over the place tonight. But, yeah, he's holding Johan at gunpoint. And while he's doing this, we see Nina come out on the stage where Schuwald is, and she's pointing a gun at Tenma, and she's like, don't shoot him. And this made me slightly curious at the time because I was like, oh no, is Nina on the same side as him? And so she ultimately ends up not being, so she just wants to kill Johan himself. She doesn't want him to become a murderer. So she then shoots at Johan a couple times, misses, and Johan ends up fleeing. Then Tenma, in the blaze, sees the stadium, or not the stadium, but the stage fall down on Schuwald and Nina, which ultimately both of them end up living, and they go to the hospital and they're fine. But then Tenma ends up getting out and all that. So then we have a scene of Carl reading a letter that Schubald left behind before he went to give the speech. And this letter reveals that Johann and Nina's mother was a woman from Czechoslovakia, and she was friends with Margot Langer, the actual Margot Langer. So Carl and Johann have a connection via their mothers being friends. But this is not the only connection, because, well, Langer eventually ends up finding a young boy who looks exactly like her friend, who's about the same age as her son. And this is obviously presumed to be Johann. So Johann had the connection of being the daughter, not the daughter, the son of Carl's mother's friend, and also being the eventual kind of like adopted child of her. And he ends up killing her. Well, it's not explicitly stated if he was the one who killed her, but she does end up getting murdered by a ghost killer. I believe it's called like I don't know exactly what they label it, but yeah, he's essentially a phantom killer. So it is presumed that Johann killed her. And then with that, like I said, we know this connection, which is very surprising. Like I was not expecting to know that connection. And this kind of leads me into my main theory. So throughout this entire thing, we do not see Johann act in a different way at all. So that kind of leads me to believe that Johann really isn't a person suffering from a personality disorder. Because we never see him act differently than he always does. Even when he's around the kids, he's manipulating the kids. Like, I thought that was going to be the thing that showed his different personality. No, he's manipulating and brainwashing the kids to do wild stunts. And with that, and eventually with the story being read by Nina, the story being read by Nina is foreshadowing. Okay. So, what is stated after that, well, while in the fire scene, is that Johann views Nina as his other half, or his other person. I don't remember exactly where it is stated. I believe it is during the fire incident, though. But he states at one point that Nina is his other half, his other person, and or I guess technically other personality, other body. And due to this statement, I believe that the monster story is about Nina and Johann, with Johann being the one who gobbles up all the other people for their names, and Nina acquired a name. She kept it for years upon years, and she was satisfied with it. So I believe she is the satisfied monster. So I believe in the end, once they come back together officially, that Johann is going to kill Nina because he will not be satisfied yet, and she will be, and therefore his jealousy will overflow in him, and he will devour Nina. Whether it's not going to be actually eating her, but he's going to kill her, I believe. So with that, then after the fire, like I said, we have that note, and then we move on to Lunge, and once again investigating everything. He's investigating the arson, and he blames it on Tenma. He goes to Carl and says, "This is the man who attempted to assassinate your father," even though he didn't. And with that, they then progress on to Schubald telling Carl that he is to meet a man in Dresden, and this man we know now is Tenma, and he reveals to him something about three frogs. I don't know what the three frogs thing is about, but I believe it has to do with Nina, Johann, and their mother, because at the end of the 39th episode, it's not Johann, but Carl reveals to Tenma that their mother is alive. She did not die, and she is still in Prague, which is in Czechoslovakia. So that leads me to believe that their mother will have a significant role in the next arc. I don't know how significant it will be, because there's not three components in the monster story, yet there is the three frogs that Schubald saw in Johann's eyes when he briefly stared at him while the fire was blazing and all that. So I do really wonder how their mother's going to come to play. I wonder what type of person she's going to be, because I don't believe she can be too good of a person, because yes, she did try to escape with her children, as it is stated in the letter that she did try to escape, but she did so unsuccessfully, and she didn't try again. And there must have been some pretty bad upbringing for Johann to end up the way he is. So I really do wonder what type of character she's going to be, how she's going to be, and just overall what impact she's going to have on the story and on Tenma. So yeah, that is the plot synopsis of episodes 31 through 39 of Monster. And honestly, the Munich arc has probably been one of my favorite arcs in all of Monster. It was a phenomenal arc. The highs were so high, the lows were barely existent. Like, I did not believe there was a single point where I was like, oh, I'm kind of bored of this. So it was a phenomenal story for the Munich arc, and I would I mean, you would have to watch the rest of Monster to watch it, but this would make me recommend Monster alone, because the Munich arc is phenomenally constructed. It's a lovely arc. It has depth, it has complexity, it has emotion, all that. It is phenomenal. So yeah, that is my breakdown of the Munich arc and Monster episodes 31 through 39, and yeah, so I thank you very much for watching episode 8 of Shelf Review, and goodbye.